Hello family, welcome to Stories with Storytime. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you, as you do. Once upon a time in a big and busy city, there lived a billionaire named Jordan. He had everything a man could ever want: luxury cars, a grand estate, and more money than he could possibly spend. But despite all his riches, Jordan felt alone. He knew people only saw his wealth and status, not the person he was inside. Jordan had dated many women, but none of them had ever truly loved him. They were all attracted to his fortune, not to who he was deep down. The more this happened, the more empty Jordan felt. He longed for someone who would care for him, not because of the gifts he could give, but because of his heart. One day, Jordan had an idea. He would leave his lavish lifestyle behind and go undercover. He planned to pretend to be a crippled beggar. He believed that if he could find someone who would show him kindness while he looked poor and helpless, that person might genuinely care for him. What no one knew was that Jordan's legs had never fully healed from a car accident years ago. Though he could walk, the pain lingered, sharp at times, dull at others, but always present. At night, it often kept him awake, a quiet reminder of the cost of his past. Now, as he prepared to sit in a wheelchair and pretend to be crippled, he wondered if the physical ache he had long endured might lead him to something real. Jordan shared his plan with his parents, who were deeply concerned. His mother, a respected real estate developer, and his father, a prominent judge, tried to discourage him. "Jordan, you could be recognized. What if someone dangerous finds out who you are? You might get kidnapped or worse," his father warned with a worried tone. "I'll be careful. I'm heading to a place where nobody knows who I am," Jordan assured them. He was determined to find true love, no matter the risk. His mind was set. He left his mansion behind and traveled to a quiet town far from the city. There, he wore ragged clothes and sat in a wheelchair. He rolled himself to a peaceful street corner, hoping to stay unnoticed. With his hands stretched out, he began to beg. "Please help me," he whispered, hoping someone would stop. He felt uneasy and exposed. It was the first time in his life he had ever asked strangers for anything. For several days, Jordan stayed on that street, watching people walk past. Most of them didn't even glance his way. A few threw him a quick look before continuing on their way. He had never felt so unseen in all his life. But one day, a young woman named Ava came by. Ava was different. She looked to be about 22, with warm eyes and a tender heart. Her family struggled to get by. Her father, Daryl, worked long hours on their modest vineyard to keep food on the table. Still, Ava always carried a smile. As she walked past Jordan's spot, she noticed him sitting in his wheelchair. He looked exhausted and hungry. Her heart softened. She stopped and knelt down, gazing into his eyes. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice filled with care. Jordan was caught off guard. It had been days since anyone had spoken to him. "I'm just trying to get by," he said, trying to sound weak. Ava looked into her small purse. She didn't have much money, but she couldn't walk away without helping him. "Here," she said, handing him a few coins. "I know it's not much, but it's all I have right now." Jordan felt a lump in his throat. Her kindness moved him in a way wealth never had. "Thank you," he whispered. "You don't know how much this means to me." Ava smiled softly. "Do you have a place to stay?" she asked. Jordan shook his head. "No," he said, feeling a bit guilty for lying. Ava paused to think. "I live with my father. Our house is small. I'd love to help you, but I'm not sure my father will agree to it." Ava hurried home, her heart still heavy with concern for the man she had met. When she stepped into their small cottage, she found her father Daryl resting after a long day tending the vineyard. His face, though marked by years of hard work, still held the warmth and kindness she cherished. "Dad, I met someone in town today," Ava began, her voice hesitant. "A man, a beggar in a wheelchair. He looked so tired and hungry." Daryl's eyes softened as he listened. "What did you do, Ava?" "I gave him the little money I had left, but he told me he doesn't have a place to stay," Ava explained. "I wanted to do more, but I wasn't sure it was the right thing." Daryl sighed deeply, thinking about the man Ava had described. "You can't leave him out there alone at night," he finally said. "No one should be left to suffer when we have a roof over our heads. Go back and bring him here." We'll make space. Ava smiled, grateful for her father's compassion. Without delay, she wrapped herself in her shawl and rushed back to where she had seen the man. When she returned, Jordan was still sitting in his wheelchair, looking lost in thought. She approached him gently, her voice cutting through the quiet evening air. "My father said you can't stay out here tonight," she said kindly. "Come with me. We'll give you a place to sleep." Jordan blinked, surprised by the offer. He had never expected such kindness from strangers, and his heart swelled with emotion. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "You don't have to say anything," Ava replied with a kind smile. "Just let us help you." With Ava's help, Jordan made his way back to her small, modest home. As he crossed the threshold, he felt a sense of warmth and safety he hadn't known in a long time. Ava and her father had so little, yet they were willing to share it with a man they barely knew. As Jordan settled into the simple room they had prepared for him, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. He realized that maybe, just maybe, he had finally found what he was looking for. But with his heart full of gratitude, he also felt a growing sense of guilt. He was living a lie, pretending to be something he was not. Jordan spent his first night in Ava and Daryl's home feeling a mix of relief and unease. The room was small, but it was clean and welcoming. As he lay on the thin mattress, he listened to the nighttime sounds, the chirping of crickets and the soft rustling of the trees outside. For the first time in a long time, he felt safe. Ava brought him a bowl of warm soup, and Jordan savored every spoonful. She sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes full of warmth. "You can stay as long as you need," she said. "We want to help you." "Thank you," Jordan replied, his voice barely audible. "You don't know how much this means to me." Over the next few days, Ava and Daryl cared for Jordan. They helped him with his daily needs and even set up a small corner in their yard as a garden where he could sit. Jordan loved spending time with Ava. She was witty and thoughtful, and he found himself laughing more than he had in years. One evening, as they sat together in the garden, Ava looked at him with concern. "You seem sad sometimes," she said. "Is there something on your mind?" Jordan wanted to tell her everything, but he held back. I'm grateful to be here," he said, forcing a smile. "I've been through a lot." Ava nodded, but Jordan could tell she was curious to know more. A pang of guilt hit him. How could he enjoy this peace while hiding the truth about who he really was? Meanwhile, back in the city, Jordan's parents were becoming increasingly worried. They hadn't heard from him since he left, and it was unlike him to go completely off the grid. Every night, his mother sat by the window, praying for her son's safety, her heart aching with worry. "Where could he be?" she whispered aloud, her voice thick with emotion. "He's our only son. He should have told us where he was going." Jordan's father tried to stay composed for his wife's sake, but he couldn't ignore the growing concern. "I'm sure he's okay," he said, though he felt a deep unease in his gut. "He's probably just taking a break from everything. You know how he is." But each day that passed without a word made them more anxious. Jordan's mother cried often, praying that her son was safe wherever he had gone. One cool evening, Daryl sat beside Jordan in the small garden. He had been meaning to ask how Jordan ended up in a wheelchair. Jordan hesitated, his heart pounding, then shared his story. He had been in a car accident a few months back. His vehicle had slid off the road, and while he had survived, his legs were seriously injured. Jordan explained that doctors told him he could walk again, but he would need surgery, one he couldn't afford. Daryl felt deep sympathy. It was a tragic burden for any man to bear. Jordan tried to hide his pain, but Daryl could see it. He made up his mind that he couldn't let Jordan go on like this. They had to find a way to help. The next morning, Daryl pulled Ava aside during breakfast and spoke to her about Jordan's condition and his need for surgery. They didn't have enough money, but Daryl suggested they start small. They could sell some of their vineyard's harvest, grapes, fruits, maybe even a few barrels of homemade wine. It wouldn't cover all the costs, but it could be a beginning. Ava admired her father's generosity and strength. They didn't have much, but Daryl had always believed in lending a hand to those in need. They decided to keep it a secret from Jordan, afraid he might reject the help. Ava started working longer hours in the vineyard, picking grapes and gathering fruit to sell at the local market. Daryl handled the daily upkeep of the land, but both father and daughter stayed focused on gathering enough goods to make an impact. At the market, Ava began selling the fresh produce. Villagers appreciated the quality of what she offered. But one day, Marcus, a wealthy young man from the city, approached her once again. Marcus had been pursuing her for months. Every time he came to the area, he offered her lavish gifts and promises of a life of luxury, if only she would agree to marry him. Marcus repeated his offer, assuring her of a life of comfort. He described how much better her days could be in the city. Ava stayed calm and again turned him down. She didn't want the life Marcus was offering. Her life, while modest, gave her peace. Marcus grew irritated. He couldn't understand why she'd choose to stay in a small town selling produce when she could live in a mansion in the city. He called her a fool for choosing to live in poverty in a rundown village. Then Marcus stormed off in anger. Ava continued her day at the market, her heart heavy, but her mind firm. She had made her choice, and she had no regrets. Back at home, Daryl and Ava kept working hard to raise money for Jordan's surgery. Every bit they earned from the market went into a hidden fund, but no matter how much they saved, it never seemed to be enough. One afternoon, Ava's best friend Mia came by her house, wearing a serious expression, though her intentions weren't pure. Marcus had approached her earlier that day, offering money to help convince Ava to marry him. He was growing tired of being rejected and thought Ava might listen to her best friend. Mia, feeling flattered, accepted the money and agreed to help. She believed Marcus was a good match for Ava, wealthy, handsome, and ready to take her away from village life. Sitting with Ava, Mia casually brought up Marcus, reminding her how many times he had come all the way to the village just to ask for her hand. She highlighted the luxury and ease awaiting her if she said yes. Ava, calm as ever, looked at her friend and simply shook her head. She had no interest in Marcus, no matter how much he promised. Mia pushed further, talking about how Ava could live in the city, wear beautiful clothes, and never have to work in the vineyard again. But Ava remained firm. She didn't want Marcus. Then she revealed something Mia never expected. She thought she was beginning to fall in love with Jordan. Mia froze, unable to believe what she had just heard. Ava in love with Jordan? That poor, crippled, broken man with nothing to his name? Mia's shock quickly turned to anger. She couldn't believe her friend was choosing a life of hardship, choosing a man who had nothing to offer. In her frustration, Mia blurted out her feelings, calling Jordan a poor, crippled man, mocking his looks and insisting Ava was making a huge mistake. She just couldn't understand how Ava could even think of loving someone like him when she had the chance to be with someone as wealthy as Marcus. Ava stayed calm through Mia's harsh words. Her decision was made. She told Mia to stop coming over if all she wanted to talk about was Marcus. Their friendship meant a lot to her, but if Mia kept pressuring her about Marcus, Ava was ready to end it. Mia, filled with disbelief and fury, stormed out of the house. After leaving Ava's, she went straight to Marcus and told him everything. Ava's rejection, her refusal to consider him, and most of all, the shocking confession that Ava was beginning to fall for Jordan. Marcus was furious. How could she fall for a man like Jordan, a beggar, while he, Marcus, was offering her everything? His anger burned inside him, and the idea of Ava choosing Jordan over him was unbearable. But as Marcus fumed, Mia's emotions shifted. She was angry too, angry at Marcus. She had always stood by him, always helped him, but he never paid her any attention. Why was he so obsessed with Ava? Mia had everything Marcus could possibly want. She was attractive, from a wealthy family, and carried herself with elegance and grace. What more could a man ask for? Frustrated and heartbroken, Mia confronted Marcus then and there. She demanded to know why he was wasting time chasing Ava when she was standing right in front of him. She reminded him of her beauty, her family's wealth, her status. She offered herself as the woman who could give him everything he ever wanted. But Marcus didn't even blink. His heart was set on Ava. To him, Ava was everything Mia wasn't: humble, down-to-earth, respectful, and quietly strong. Marcus admired those qualities, things Mia didn't have. Hearing Marcus speak so highly of Ava only deepened Mia's jealousy. She hated how men, especially Marcus, were always drawn to Ava. No matter how hard she tried, she could never attract the same attention. And now, with Marcus rejecting her for a poor village girl like Ava, her jealousy turned into something darker. From that moment, Mia carried a deep resentment toward Ava, one that would only grow with time, as she walked away from Marcus. Her mind was spinning with thoughts of how to bring Ava down. Marcus's rejection had hurt, but what stung more was that Ava, the girl who had so little, seemed to have all the admiration and love that Mia desperately wanted. As the days passed, Ava and Daryl continued working hard, selling grapes and fruit at the local market. But no matter how much they sold, the money they made wasn't nearly enough for Jordan's surgery. Daryl knew he couldn't let it continue like this. Jordan's condition weighed heavily on him, and he had grown to care deeply for the young man. He couldn't just sit back and watch Jordan's chance at recovery disappear. He knew the surgery was the only path for Jordan to ever walk again. One evening, after another long day in the vineyard, Daryl made up his mind. He owned 2 pieces of land, the only valuable possessions he had. They had been passed down from his ancestors and were the last tie to his family's heritage. But Daryl was a man of deep compassion, and Jordan's suffering was too much for him to ignore. That night, he decided to sell one of the plots to get enough money for Jordan's surgery. The next day, Daryl quietly went ahead with the sale. His heart ached. He knew the value of what he was giving up, but he couldn't let that stop him. This was Jordan's opportunity to get out of the wheelchair, and Daryl was willing to make the sacrifice. He returned home that evening with the money in hand, eager to tell Jordan the good news. When he arrived, he found Jordan sitting quietly in the modest living room, gazing out the window. The evening light streamed softly through the open doorway. With a smile, Daryl told Jordan that the money for his surgery was ready, that he had sold his land to make it happen. Jordan's face turned pale. He was stunned. This man, who had barely enough to support his own family, had sold his only real asset for him. A wave of guilt crashed over Jordan, and he couldn't stay silent any longer. He had already taken too much from this family, and now they were giving up everything for him. Jordan swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he began to confess. He told Daryl the truth, that he wasn't really a beggar, that he wasn't poor. He explained how he was actually a billionaire, how he had come to the village pretending to be someone else in hopes of finding real love. He had grown tired of women who were only after his money, so he created this lie to see if someone could care about him for who he truly was. Daryl stood frozen, shocked, as Jordan revealed the whole truth. The room felt heavy with the weight of Jordan's words. After a long silence, Daryl's expression hardened. Without a word, he stormed out of the house, unable to take in the betrayal. He walked to a quiet part of the yard and dropped to his knees. His heart broke as tears filled his eyes. This man he had trusted had been lying to them all along. Daryl had sold his land, his family's legacy, for a lie. He had believed in Jordan's suffering, and now it felt like everything was falling apart. Ava had been nearby and saw her father rush out of the house. She quickly went inside and found Jordan sitting there, his face consumed with guilt. She demanded to know what had happened. Already weighed down by shame, Jordan confessed to her, just as he had to her father. Ava stood there, stunned at first, her emotions spinning. When the truth finally sank in, anger surged through her. She looked at Jordan with a mix of disbelief and fury. All this time, she and her father had been working so hard, giving up what little they had, all because they thought he was truly in need. How could he have lied to them like this? How could he stand by and let them suffer, knowing they were sacrificing everything for him? Tears welled up in her eyes as her anger boiled over. Without holding back, Ava let her pain out, her voice trembling with emotion. She told Jordan how cruel his deception had been, how deeply he had hurt them. Her father had sold their land, their last hope for a better life, all for someone who never actually needed help. Ava's heart felt shattered. She had started to care for Jordan. She had even begun to imagine a future with him, but now all she saw was betrayal. Jordan tried to explain. He begged her to understand his reasons, swearing he never meant to cause harm. But Ava couldn't listen. The truth was too heavy. She turned away from him, tears streaming down her cheeks as she walked to her room. There, alone, she let the tears fall freely. She cried for her father, who had given up everything, and for herself, for trusting a man who had deceived them so completely. The house was silent that night, the air filled with sorrow and betrayal. Daryl remained outside, caught in his grief, while Ava cried herself to sleep. Jordan, filled with regret, sat alone, not knowing how to repair what he had broken. News of Jordan's real identity spread through the village like wildfire. It didn't take long before everyone knew that the crippled beggar was actually a billionaire. Whispers swirled through the streets as neighbors gathered to discuss the shocking truth. The man they had pitied for months was not who he seemed. Many couldn't believe it, but eventually, no one could deny the reality. When the news reached Marcus, it hit him like a punch to the gut. In an instant, he knew his hopes of winning Ava's heart were crushed. How could he compete with a billionaire? The woman he had pursued for so long would never look at him the same again. He knew it was the end of the road for him, and his desperation deepened. With no other options, Marcus decided to visit Mia. He showed up at her house, his pride wounded, but still hoping to salvage something. Standing in front of her, he told Mia that he was ready to be with her, ready to start a relationship now that Ava had rejected him. He hoped Mia would accept him and forget the past, but Mia's reaction wasn't what he had expected. She burst into loud laughter, her voice echoing through the room. She looked at Marcus with a mix of ridicule and disdain. "You must be out of your mind," she said, "to think I would ever marry someone like you." Marcus stood frozen, his heart sinking. Mia kept going, her words sharp and unforgiving. "Do you really think I don't know the truth? You've been parading around in your boss's cars and clothes, pretending to be rich, but you're not. You're a fraud, Marcus. You've been exposed, and I would never waste my time on someone like you." Marcus's face went pale. His secret, the one he had guarded so carefully, was out. Mia had figured it out. Not long ago, she had discovered that the flashy cars he drove and the designer clothes he wore weren't his. He had been faking wealth just to impress Ava. But now the illusion had crumbled. Humiliated, Marcus turned and walked away, his head low in shame. He had lost everything: Ava, his pride, and now even Mia's respect. The next morning, Jordan gathered the courage to talk to Ava. He had spent the entire night reflecting on everything. The lies, the hurt he had caused her and her father, and the future he still hoped to have with her. Jordan knew he had made terrible choices, but his feelings for Ava were genuine. He found her outside the house, her face still showing the pain of the last few days. Jordan approached slowly, burdened by regret. He told Ava he was ready to bring her back to the city with him, that he wanted to make things right. He spoke about a life they could have together, far from the village, where she would never have to struggle again. Jordan promised he would care for her and her father, that they would never want for anything again. But Ava's face stayed firm, her eyes filled with sadness. She didn't look at him with anger this time, but with deep disappointment. She told him she couldn't go with him. The wounds from his lies were still too raw, and she wasn't ready to walk away from everything. Jordan tried again to explain, to show her how much he loved her. But Ava's mind was made up. Without another word, she turned and left. She went to find her father. Together, Ava and Daryl gathered their tools and prepared to head to the vineyard. As they walked away, Jordan stood there, watching them fade into the distance. His heart ached, knowing that his lies had cost him more than he ever imagined. He had come to the village searching for love, but now he was left with nothing but regret. Ava worked quietly beside her father, her mind swirling with thoughts of Jordan. She had cared for him deeply, had even begun to imagine a future with him. But the betrayal was too much. Her father, though silent, shared her pain. He had trusted Jordan, had sold his land for him, only to find out the man he had welcomed into their home had been living a lie. As Jordan sat alone, wondering what to do next, Mia came to see him. She had heard about the tension between him and Ava and saw it as an opportunity to get closer. She walked up to him, pretending to be concerned, but she had a different agenda, one rooted in lies and manipulation. Mia told Jordan that Ava wasn't as honest as she seemed. She said Ava had been pretending to be a kind, sweet girl, but it was all an act. Mia claimed Ava had only been playing with his feelings and wasn't truly interested in him. She went further, saying Ava had been flirting with other men in the village and didn't really care about him. Her words hit Jordan hard. and he didn't know what to believe. Then, Mia confessed that she liked him. She said she had admired him from the beginning, even when he was sitting on the streets pretending to be poor. She tried to convince Jordan that she was the one who truly cared, not Ava. Jordan, who had been quietly listening, finally asked a question. "If you liked me, why didn't you say something when I was pretending to be crippled? Why wait until now?" Mia quickly replied, "I was waiting for the right moment. I didn't want to interfere while you were figuring things out with Ava." Jordan's expression grew serious. He had heard enough. "Get out," he said firmly. "I know what you're doing, Mia. You're just after my money. You're spoiled and selfish, nothing more than a gold digger." Mia's face turned red with embarrassment and anger. She hadn't expected Jordan to reject her like that. She stormed out of the house, humiliated and upset. As she left, she muttered bitter words under her breath, blaming Ava for everything. Mia thought, if it weren't for Ava, I could have had Jordan. Days passed, and Jordan tried everything he could to convince Ava and Daryl to come with him to the city. He apologized over and over, trying to explain that he never meant to hurt them. But the damage had already been done. Ava couldn't trust him anymore, and Daryl felt betrayed. No matter what Jordan said, they couldn't look at him the same way again. Jordan felt more heartbroken and lost than ever before. This family had shown him what real love looked like. They hadn't cared about his money. They had taken him in, fed him, and treated him like one of their own when they believed he had nothing. It was the love he had always wanted. But now, because of his lies, he had ruined it all. One morning, Jordan decided it was time to leave the village. He knew staying would only bring more hurt. He couldn't bear to see the pain in Ava's eyes or the disappointment on Daryl's face. With a heavy heart, he packed his things and prepared to return to the city. Before he left, Jordan sat alone in the house one last time, remembering all the moments he had shared with Ava and her father. The laughter, the warmth, and the hope that he had once had for something real with them. It was hard for him to walk away from the only family that had ever truly loved him. As Jordan walked down the road, leaving the house behind, he looked back one last time. His heart ached, knowing that this place had once felt like home. The love he had searched for his whole life had been right here, but he had lost it because of his lies. With the sun setting in the distance, Jordan kept walking, the village slowly fading behind him. His mind was filled with regret. No amount of money could fill the emptiness he felt now. The love he had destroyed was something money could never buy. As Jordan walked away from Ava's home, her heart broke. Tears streamed down her face as she cried for hours. She had fallen in love with Jordan, despite everything, and now he was gone. Her mind was full of regret. She questioned why she had let him go, why she had allowed her anger to push him away. Though he had lied about his identity, she knew deep down that he had a good heart. She had seen the kindness in his eyes and felt the warmth of his presence. Now it was all gone, and she couldn't help but feel she had made a terrible mistake. Back in the city, Jordan's mother was the first to see him when he returned to their mansion. The moment she laid eyes on her son, she rushed to him with her arms open wide. She embraced him tightly, tears of relief filling her eyes. She had been so worried since he had left for an unknown village. "Thank God you're back," she said, holding him close. "We were so scared. Where have you been?" Jordan sighed deeply and sat down to explain everything. He told her about the village, how he had pretended to be poor in order to find real love, and how he had met Ava and her father. He spoke of their kindness, how they had cared for him, and how he had fallen in love with Ava. His mother listened quietly, her heart softening with every word. She felt sympathy for her son, realizing how much that simple family had meant to him. When Jordan finished his story, his mother looked at him with sorrow in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Jordan. It sounds like they truly cared about you. But life can be unfair sometimes. Maybe it's for the best. You'll find love again, I'm sure." Just then, the front door opened and Jordan's father walked in. He was a tall, stern man, a powerful businessman and respected figure in politics. His father had been focused on one goal for the past year, becoming governor. He had connections, strategies, and a full campaign plan. Everything was falling into place, except one thing: Jordan's marriage. Jordan's father barely acknowledged him as he headed straight to his study. Jordan followed, knowing he needed to explain everything. When he reached the office, he stood at the door, waiting for his father to acknowledge him. "Father, I'm back," Jordan said. His father nodded without looking up from his papers. "So you finally decided to return. Where have you been all this time?" Jordan explained the entire situation again, hoping his father would understand. But as he spoke, his father's expression stayed cold and unmoved. When Jordan finished, his father leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Good," he said after a pause. "I'm glad she rejected you." Jordan was stunned. "What?" "I never supported this nonsense from the beginning," his father continued. "Going off to a village pretending to be someone you're not, all to find true love. It was foolish." Jordan's heart sank. He had hoped for even a shred of sympathy from his father, but he should have known better. His father had never cared about love or emotions. For him, everything was about power and alliances. "Listen to me, Jordan," his father said, his tone sharp. "You are my only son, and I have a lot riding on you. I've already made arrangements for you to marry Judge Hamilton's daughter. You know how important this is. Judge Hamilton is crucial to securing my election as governor, and I won't let anything ruin that. You will marry her, or there will be consequences." Jordan's chest tightened with anger and frustration. "But I don't love her. I don't even know her." His father slammed his hand on the desk, sending papers flying. "This is not about love. This is about power, about the future of this family. Judge Hamilton's daughter guarantees my victory, and you will marry her whether you want to or not. Just because you're my only son, you think you can do whatever you please?" Jordan stood frozen. He had always known his father was controlling, but this went too far. His father was willing to trade away his happiness just to further his political career. "You have one job, Jordan," his father continued, "and that's to marry Judge Hamilton's daughter. Forget about that girl from the village. She's nothing compared to what you could have." Without saying a word, Jordan turned and left the room, his mind spinning. He knew he wasn't just fighting his father. He was fighting with himself. Could he really go against his father's wishes and follow his heart, or would he allow himself to be trapped in a life he didn't want, just to serve his father's ambitions? Jordan couldn't take it any longer. The crushing pressure from his father and the forced engagement to a woman he didn't care about were too much. One evening, he went to his mother and told her he was leaving for the village. He couldn't picture a life without Ava and her father, who had shown him more kindness than anyone else ever had. He explained to his mother that he wanted to be with them, to live a simple life, far from the demands of his father's political schemes. His mother, concerned, tried to talk him out of it. She warned him how dangerous it was to go against his father, how their family's future could be at risk, but Jordan wasn't listening. His heart was with Ava. He couldn't bear the idea of losing her again, and the thought of spending his life with someone else made him feel sick. He quietly packed his bags, and before his father returned home that evening, Jordan was already on his way back to the village. When he arrived at Ava's home, she was shocked but overwhelmed with joy. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw him standing at the door. She had missed him deeply and feared she would never see him again. Tears filled her eyes as she welcomed him back into their modest home. That night, they sat together and talked about their future, about the pain they both endured while apart. Jordan knew he had made the right decision. His heart felt lighter being with the woman he truly loved. Meanwhile, back in the city, Jordan's father came home and found out from his wife that their son had left. He was furious. He stormed around the room, shouting that he would send men to the village the next day to drag Jordan back, whether he wanted to or not. His wife, seeing how enraged he was, tried to calm him down. She understood how much Jordan meant to both of them, and she also knew how stubborn her husband could be. That night, she sat him down and suggested they try a different method. Instead of forcing Jordan back, she proposed letting him bring Ava and her father to the city. Once they arrived, she would offer them a large sum of money to make them walk away from Jordan. Jordan's father, still boiling with anger, stopped for a moment. Her plan made sense to him. After all, he believed that everyone had a price. He was sure that once Ava and her father saw the money, they would be quick to disappear, leaving Jordan free to return to the future his family had laid out for him. Grudgingly, he agreed to let his wife handle things. She promised him everything would work out and that they would soon have their son back on track. Jordan's father calmed down, convinced that money could fix the situation. But deep inside, Jordan's mother knew it wouldn't be that easy. She had seen the look in her son's eyes when he spoke of Ava. The next day, Jordan's mother called him. She told him he could bring Ava and her father to the city. Jordan was overjoyed. He rushed to tell Ava the news, and she shared it with her father, Daryl, who had never been to the city in his life. Daryl happily agreed to go. He was excited about the chance to experience something new and grateful for the support Jordan's family was offering. When they arrived in the city, Jordan's father met with Daryl and calmly explained that he had bought them a house and arranged a business for him so he wouldn't have to labor in the vineyard anymore. Daryl, overwhelmed with gratitude, thanked Jordan's father sincerely. He never imagined such generosity would come his way. With new hope in his heart, he and Ava moved into their new home. However, one afternoon, everything took a dark turn. Jordan's father visited Ava alone, his expression cold and stern. He told her that now that he had provided them with a house and business, they were to stay away from his son. He warned her that if she or her father didn't obey, they would disappear, and no one would dare question it. Fear gripped Ava as the threat sank in. She didn't know what to do. Shaking, she called Jordan and told him everything. Furious, Jordan confronted his father at once. He couldn't believe that after everything, his father would still go behind his back. Without wasting any time, Jordan went straight to Judge Hamilton's home. He looked the judge directly in the eyes and told him he would never marry his daughter, under any circumstances. To drive his point home, he even lied and claimed that his girlfriend, Ava, was already pregnant with his child. The news hit the judge hard. His face flushed with anger and disbelief. He couldn't believe Jordan had rejected his daughter so harshly. Judge Hamilton stormed out and headed straight to Jordan's father. Livid, he declared that he would no longer support Jordan's father's campaign for governor. Without his political influence, Jordan's father's dreams were crushed. Judge Hamilton made it clear. He wanted nothing more to do with the family. Then he walked out, leaving Jordan's father in stunned silence. Jordan's father was furious after the confrontation with Judge Hamilton. Desperate to salvage his political ambitions, he tried calling the judge again and again, but each time, his calls were ignored. Frustration built inside him. Soon, his rage turned toward his son, Jordan. He warned Jordan that if he lost the election, the consequences would be beyond imagination. But Jordan stood firm. He had chosen love over his father's ambitions, and he wasn't going to back down. The day of the election finally came. Jordan's father waited anxiously for the results, but when the announcement was made, it destroyed all his hopes. He had lost. The rival party had won the governorship. Without Judge Hamilton's backing, he didn't stand a chance. The loss consumed him with anger. His dreams of power, wealth, and status were in ruins, and he blamed Jordan for all of it. Blinded by rage, Jordan's father made a terrible decision. He sent men to Daryl's home with instructions to teach them a lesson. That night, they arrived at Daryl's modest house and viciously attacked him. They beat him until he collapsed, unconscious on the floor. When they finally left, it was an act of senseless revenge for something Daryl had no control over. Later that evening, when Ava returned from the market, she found her father lying on the floor, barely breathing. Panic surged through her. She screamed for help, and with the assistance of some neighbors, rushed him to the hospital. Tears streamed down her face as they drove as fast as they could. At the hospital, the doctor took one look at Daryl and immediately got to work. After what felt like hours, the doctor came out and told Ava that if she hadn't brought him in when she did, her father wouldn't have made it. It was a miracle he was still alive. Jordan rushed to the hospital as soon as he heard the news. When he saw Daryl lying in the hospital bed, bruised and weak, his heart sank. This was the man who had taken him in, the man who had shown him kindness without ever knowing who he truly was. Seeing Daryl in that state shattered something inside Jordan. He couldn't hold back the tears. He knew this was all his father's doing, and it filled him with guilt and sorrow. The only family that had ever truly loved him was suffering because of him. Ava sat by her father's side, holding his hand, crying quietly. Jordan joined her, his heart heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. He knew he needed to make things right, but in that moment, all he could do was sit with Ava and pray that Daryl would pull through. When Jordan returned home after the emotional day at the hospital, he was consumed with rage and grief. His heart pounded with every image of Ava's father lying helpless in that hospital bed. He had reached his breaking point. His father's greed and cruelty had gone too far. In a storm of fury, Jordan burst into his room, opened a drawer, and pulled out a gun. His hands trembled, gripped by both anger and resolve. For the first time, he felt truly ready to confront his father, no matter what the cost. Jordan stormed downstairs to his father's study, where the older man sat drinking whiskey, still furious over the election defeat. The door slammed open, and his father looked up, startled by the sudden intrusion. Jordan stood in the doorway, gripping the gun tightly, his face dark with fury. Without saying a word, he raised the weapon and aimed it directly at his father. The shock on his father's face was instant. He had never seen Jordan like this. The son who had always been obedient and respectful now stood before him, gun in hand, threatening him. Jordan's voice was cold and unwavering, a tone his father had never heard. "If Ava's father dies," Jordan said slowly, "then you will die too." His words cut through the room like a blade. For a moment, his father sat frozen in place, unable to respond. The gravity of his son's threat hit him hard. This wasn't a bluff. Jordan meant every word. The rage in his eyes was something his father had never thought possible. Jordan's father finally spoke, his voice trembling. "Jordan, put the gun down. You don't want to do this." But Jordan didn't budge. His grip on the gun stayed tight, and his eyes never left his father. "You've done enough," Jordan said. "Because of you, an innocent man is lying in a hospital bed, fighting for his life, all because of your greed, your obsession with control. If he doesn't survive, I swear you'll pay for it with your own life." His father felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He had spent years forcing Jordan to follow his rules, his vision, his ambitions for the family's legacy. He had never cared about Jordan's dreams or what he truly wanted in life. And now, seeing the fury and hurt in his son's eyes, he realized he had gone too far. He had broken something in Jordan. Tears welled in the older man's eyes, something Jordan had never seen before. His father lowered his head in shame. "Jordan, I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. I just wanted you to have the life I thought was right for you." But Jordan was unmoved. "You've never cared about what's right for me. You've only ever cared about what's right for you. Well, I'm done. If Daryl dies, you'll see exactly how far I'm willing to go." Jordan's father nodded slowly, beginning to grasp the weight of his son's pain and the seriousness of the threat. He couldn't lose his only son. Not like this. For the first time in his life, Jordan's father felt real fear, not just from the gun, but from the possibility of losing Jordan forever. He looked at Jordan, the boy he had raised, now standing before him like a stranger, and the truth hit him. He had pushed too hard, demanded too much, and taken everything for granted. His greed, his thirst for power had led them to this moment. He had no one to blame but himself. Slowly, he raised his hands, showing Jordan that he meant no harm. "Jordan," he said, his voice gentler now, "put the gun down. I'll fix this. I promise I won't let anything happen to Daryl." Jordan's expression remained hard, but he saw the change in his father's eyes. The guilt was real, but the damage was already done. He lowered the gun slightly, though his voice stayed sharp. "Fixing this won't restore the trust you've broken," Jordan said. "You can't undo what you've done." His father nodded, understanding that apologies meant little now. "I know," he whispered, "but I'll try. I'll call off the men. I'll make sure Daryl gets the best care. I'll make it right." Jordan stood there, still breathing heavily, the gun now completely lowered. He didn't know if he could believe his father's promises, but he didn't want to add more violence to the pain. Slowly, he placed the gun down on the table between them. His father exhaled in relief, but didn't dare move. "I'll hold you to your word," Jordan said firmly. "If anything happens to Ava's father, I'll never forgive you, and I'll never come back." His father nodded again, more tears slipping from his eyes. "I understand, son. I won't let you down this time, I promise." Jordan turned and walked out of the room, leaving his father sitting alone in silence, weighed down by guilt and regret. For the first time, the consequences of his actions truly sank in. He had almost lost his only son, and worse, he had caused suffering to a family that had shown nothing but kindness to Jordan. As Jordan stepped out into the night, his heart was overwhelmed by emotion. He wanted to believe his father, but years of broken promises made it difficult. The only thing he knew for certain was that he had to protect Ava and her father. They were the only people who had ever seen him as a person, not a symbol of status or fortune. Jordan headed straight to the hospital to check on Daryl. When he arrived, he found Ava still at her father's side, holding his hand, tears in her eyes. She looked up when she saw Jordan and offered a faint, weary smile. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice soft and drained. Jordan nodded, though his heart remained heavy. "I made sure my father won't hurt your family again," he said. "I promise. You're safe now." Ava looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mix of relief and fatigue. She didn't respond with words, just held her father's hand a little tighter. Jordan sat beside her and gently took her other hand. For a moment, they sat in silence, two people trying to find peace in the middle of so much turmoil. The love between them was real, but the challenges they faced were bigger than they had expected. Still, in that quiet moment, knowing they had each other gave them strength. The next day, Jordan's father came to the hospital, burdened by the weight of remorse. He had spent the entire night reflecting on his actions, how his ambition had almost destroyed the one family that had shown his son what real love looked like. When he walked into Daryl's hospital room, the atmosphere was tense. Ava sat beside her father's bed, and Jordan stood near the window, his back turned. Daryl, though still weak, gave a faint smile when he saw Jordan's father. He had already heard the full story from Ava and knew that the older man bore some responsibility for what had happened to him. But Daryl, always humble and forgiving, believed in giving people another chance. Jordan's father paused, then slowly walked toward the bed. He looked down at the man who had suffered because of him, shame rising in his chest. He cleared his throat and spoke softly. "I'm sorry, Daryl," he said, voice low and sincere. "I've made terrible mistakes. I let my ambition blind me, and I hurt you and your family. I'm not proud of what I've done, but I want to make it right." Daryl, still too weak to speak much, simply nodded. Ava watched her father closely, carefully waiting for his response. She had never seen him angry, but for the first time, Ava wondered if her father could truly forgive someone who had caused so much pain. After a long pause, Daryl finally spoke. "Life is short," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. "There's no room for grudges. What matters now is making sure my daughter is happy, and that your son is happy too." Jordan's father, relieved, nodded. He had never met someone as gracious as Daryl, and in that moment, he promised himself he would do everything in his power to support this family from now on. Back in the village, things were changing for Mia. For months, she had been prideful and boastful, always showing off her looks and hoping to marry into wealth. But after her falling out with Ava and Marcus, she began to feel more and more alone. Her plan to help Marcus win Ava's heart had failed, and in doing so, she had pushed everyone away. That's when a man arrived, seemingly out of nowhere. He came to the village dressed in designer clothes and driving a flashy car, claiming to be a successful businessman looking for a wife. Mia, eager to prove she still had what it took to win, was quickly drawn to him. He spoke of a grand home in the city, multiple cars, and a luxurious life. Blinded by her desire for status, Mia fell for him fast. They were engaged before long. The man promised to take her to the city right after the wedding, and Mia was convinced her dream life had finally come true. But hidden beneath his charm was a terrible truth. He wasn't a wealthy businessman at all. In reality, he was a poor roadside mechanic. He had learned about Mia through Marcus, who had grown bitter and resentful after Ava's rejection. Marcus had paid this man to deceive Mia as revenge for all the money she had taken from him, always promising to help him win Ava, but never following through. Mia, 6 months pregnant by the time the man entered her life, had no idea about his true identity. She was thrilled about her future, ready to leave the village behind and embrace the glamorous life she'd always envisioned. But when they arrived in the city after the wedding, the truth hit her like a storm. There was no mansion. Instead, they arrived at a small, dilapidated shack near a loud, grimy garage. No luxury, no riches, just noise, grease, and endless labor. The man, now exposed as a poor mechanic, had no wealth, no business, and no intention of caring for Mia the way she had imagined. He had only used Marcus's money to bait her, and now she was trapped. Mia cried for days, realizing how deeply she had been fooled. But what made it worse was that she was already 6 months pregnant with the mechanic's child. There was no escaping her reality now. She had spent so long looking down on others, only to end up in a situation worse than any she had ever imagined. She hated herself for her greed, for letting herself be deceived, and for turning her back on the people who had once been her friends. Now, she was stuck in a small, miserable home with a man she didn't love, carrying his child, and with no way out. The city life she had dreamed about had become a nightmare, and she had no one to blame but herself. As the months went by, Mia's bitterness deepened. She regretted everything. The way she had treated Ava, the choices she had made for money, and, most of all, falling for a lie. But it was too late. She was 6 months pregnant, tied to a man she didn't love, living a life far removed from the dreams she used to brag about. A month after Jordan and Ava's wedding, their lives seemed to bloom with joy. 3 months later, Ava found out she was pregnant. The news filled Jordan with excitement. He could hardly believe he was going to be a father. He embraced Ava tightly, his heart overflowing with happiness. He now had everything he had ever wanted, a loving wife and soon a child. When Jordan's mother heard the news, she was just as thrilled. Though their relationship with Ava had once been strained, she was now truly happy for her son. She couldn't wait to meet her grandchild. She sent gifts and called Ava often, making sure she had everything she needed. One day, Jordan was overwhelmed with work and back-to-back meetings. Not wanting to disturb him, Ava decided to drive herself to her antenatal appointment, confident she could manage. She kissed Jordan goodbye and left the house with a smile. But as Ava drove down the road, her car suddenly started making strange sounds and came to a halt. She tried restarting the engine, but it wouldn't budge. Staying calm, she got out of the car and looked around. Across the street, she noticed a small mechanic shop, so she decided to walk over and ask for help. As she crossed the road, she spotted a woman sitting by the roadside eating a piece of bread. The woman's clothes were worn and her hair was tangled. Ava took a closer look and could hardly believe her eyes. It was Mia, her former friend. Mia looked up and immediately recognized Ava. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she took in Ava's appearance, her elegant dress, her glowing skin, and the undeniable happiness radiating from her. Tears welled in Mia's eyes. She had never imagined seeing Ava again, especially not looking so fulfilled. Mia began to cry, her voice trembling as she explained everything to Ava. She had lost everything after being betrayed by Marcus, and her life had spiraled out of control. She ended up with a man who had lied about his wealth, and by the time she discovered the truth, she was already pregnant. He abandoned her, and with no one left to turn to, Mia had been living on the streets, struggling to survive. Ava listened in silence, her heart filled with a mix of pity and sorrow for Mia. Despite everything that had happened between them, she couldn't ignore the pain in Mia's voice. Before leaving, Ava pulled out her checkbook, wrote down a generous amount, and handed it to Mia. "Use this to start something new," Ava said softly. "I hope it helps you get back on your feet." Mia was overwhelmed with gratitude. She couldn't believe that Ava, the same woman she had once ridiculed, was now helping her during her darkest moment. With tears in her eyes, she thanked Ava again and again. Ava smiled gently, then walked back to her car. After getting assistance from the mechanic, she drove away feeling at peace for helping Mia. Later that evening, when Jordan returned home, Ava told him everything that had happened. Jordan listened thoughtfully and then said, "It's good that you helped her. It's never right to look down on others. Life has a way of changing things when we least expect it." Ava nodded, realizing that her act of kindness had made a difference, not only for Mia, but for herself, too. In the end, the story reminds us that true love and kindness come from the heart, not from wealth or social status. Money can't buy genuine love, and it's important to value people for who they truly are, not for what they own. Jordan found his real happiness in embracing love and compassion, rather than hiding behind riches. Ava's kindness and willingness to care for others showed that what truly matters in life is how we treat people. Dear viewers, what lessons did you take away from this dramatic story? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our latest updates. Thanks for watching, and stay blessed.